Hi YouTube. In my last video, I talked about the definition of a son husband and how my brother and ex-husband were perfect examples of son husbands. My brother, being the golden child, had taken on the role of patriarch of the family and trying to control everyone's lives, even though my father was and is still alive. My brother is very judgmental and can be abusive, and it was hard for me to see the abuse at first. When passive-aggressive abuse is all that you know, it becomes your normal. In the ER, when an elderly confused patient comes in, we always ask, what is their baseline? Are they confused at their baseline, or is the confusion new? It helps us know how to treat them. Maybe the cause of the confusion is just something metabolic, like a urinary tract infection or sepsis. We look for a cause of the confusion when we know this is not their normal. Well, when you're raised as the family scapegoat, abuse, whether passive or active, is essentially your normal. I was used to my brother being treated like the golden child, and my feelings, wants, needs, desires, whatever, didn't matter, because this was my normal. I failed to see the subtle signs of abuse that were building over time between my brother and kids. I live next to my parents and my brother, but I'm in the process of building a new house near my work in a different city and away from the abuse. I never realized the amount of anger my brother has towards me, my daughter, and the world in general. It's an angry frustration that I saw in my narcissistic husband as well. I think they're frustrated and angry when they don't get the adulation they feel they deserve or haven't achieved what they wanted to in life. I think this is particularly relevant to my brother. Anytime there is a disagreement mostly started by him, the scapegoat, or me in this case, is expected to be the bigger person and apologize. Everything is always my fault or my children's fault. And this is the family normal, or baseline. As I mentioned in my last video, my brother never left home. His entire life was enmeshed with my parents up until he married in his mid-40s. They did everything together, including going to the same church. My brother wanted a way into the popular crowd at church. That particular clique ran the church youth group. My brother volunteered to work with the youth group, but it was a little creepy without having a kid of your own in the group. I mean, think of it this way. An unmarried man in his 40s that lives at home with mom and dad and doesn't date, and he wants to hang around a bunch of preteen and teenage girls? No red flags there. He found his way into the group by asking, or should I say demanding, my daughter to join. He suggested that she join the youth group to make friends her own age, but this was also about the time my daughter started questioning her sexuality. Now imagine a young impressionable child starting puberty, and she's beginning to realize she's attracted to girls, but at the same time she's going to youth group every Sunday night where they're preaching about how girls like her are sinners and going to hell. Had I known at the time, I would have yanked her out of that youth group in less than 5 minutes. But she was afraid to tell me. It didn't take long for her to tell me, though, that she didn't want to go to youth group anymore. I later learned that there were several kids that were bullying her, and my brother did nothing about it. He was actually angry when I told him she was being bullied. He said that it was her own fault because she didn't fit in with the other kids, and during the meeting when the kids played basketball, she would just go off by herself. That's how my brother talks. He said she embarrassed him because she wasn't even trying to make friends. I told him that it's hard when you're the new kid and that she has made friends at school, just not in the youth group. My brother was angry that she quit youth group, and my mother took my brother's side of the story. Of course, if the son husband thinks she should go to youth group and she's not making friends, he must be right. My brother was just angry because her going to youth group did not give him the advantage to get in with the popular crowd. Later on, my brother would join a church that I believe to be an independent fundamentalist Baptist church. Now, if you don't know what that is, they're an extremely conservative group of Baptist churches that people have support groups on Facebook and other social media talking about the narcissistic abuse they suffered in these congregations. I had to be gone for about 30 days for the Army back during the pandemic. My children stayed with my parents over that month, and I was gone during the 4th of July. So while I was gone, they took the kids to a 4th of July picnic sponsored by the church. My kids were ridiculed by the churchgoers, asking them to take off their masks. My kids said they were not comfortable in large groups without a mask. They have heard multiple stories of deaths in the ER from the pandemic and didn't want to get the virus themselves. During the picnic, my kids walked away from the group and were walking along the tree line in the public park. As they were walking, a middle-aged white male from the church approached them and said, "Hey, we're all friends here. Why do you want to wear a mask?" Don't you want to come back and talk to everyone? My kids were raised to have boundaries, and I've taught them stranger danger, and they get a good dose of it as well in karate class. My daughter told me later that she just had a very creepy vibe about the man, and the fact that he approached them while they were alone like he had been watching them. She answered him loudly and said, "We don't know you, and we are not friends. Please leave us alone." The kids walked away quickly from him and found my parents. Now, if I were a middle-aged white man, there is no way I would approach two children alone in a public park. It has serial killer, or something a lot worse, written all over it. My brother was outraged at their behavior. He used as evidence once again that my children are disrespectful and not social. My brother's negative attitude towards my children had been building for years, but then he unleashed his venom on me. When I graduated from nursing school, I didn't invite my family. I was just going to take the kids with me because I knew the ceremony would be long and he would complain. Instead, my mother said they were all going, including my brother, father, her, and the kids. Of course, the ceremony was over an hour, and I knew my brother would not like that. At the reception afterwards, I was talking with my professors and the other students. The kids were having a ball, helping themselves to the cake and punch and other refreshments. My mother came up to me and said, "Your brother is ready to go. How long is this going to take? He hasn't eaten anything all day, and he's starving." Apparently my brother had thought we would go out to a nice restaurant afterwards, and by nice I mean steak and potatoes, and he had starved himself all day long. I had not made any plans, and even if we did go out, it wouldn't be to a restaurant I wanted to go to. He continued to make a scene about how he was hungry and the ceremony was too long. I was embarrassed because my professors could hear everything. He was acting like a 2-year-old child. I told my mother, "He's a grown-ass man and hasn't eaten anything. It's 5 p.m." I told her to leave the kids with me and they could go. They left, but my feelings were really hurt. I had paid extra for 2 stoles of gratitude. These are sashes that you wear during the ceremony, and then afterwards you place them over the shoulders of someone you are grateful to that helped you through college. I had planned to give them to my parents after the ceremony, but they left before I could do that. I realized I should have given them to my kids. They had been the ones to really support me all these years. I placed the stoles on their shoulders and explained the meaning behind them, and then said, "Why don't we go out to dinner?" The kids were excited and wanted to go to a pizza place. We went home and changed out of our good clothes, and then went to the restaurant and ordered food. My mother called and asked if we had out to eat yet. I told her where we were, and then a few minutes later they showed up and sat down at our table. I really didn't want to see my brother or talk to him after his behavior, but there he was eating dinner. They ordered food as well and had a large basket of breadsticks brought to the table. My kids just assumed the breadsticks were for everyone, and my daughter reached over to grab one. My brother snatched it out of her hand and said, "These aren't for you." He then pulled the whole basket over to his side of the table and ate the entire thing. Later that weekend, the straw that broke the camel's back took place, and my brother showed even more toxic behavior. He had noticed that something was getting into my bird feeders and pulling them off the hooks. He set up an animal cage trap in front of my bird feeders. The next morning, I saw 3 baby raccoons in the trap. The mother raccoon was desperately trying to get the trap open. The trap was right outside my daughter's window where she could see the whole thing. She asked, "Mom, what is my uncle going to do with the baby raccoons?" I said, "He's going to shoot them when he gets home from church." My daughter started crying and begged me to let them go. Now, I know raccoons can carry rabies, but I just couldn't let my brother kill them. I went outside, and this scared the mother raccoon off. I took a long broom handle and managed to open the door on the trap. The 3 babies ran out of the trap and ran towards their mother that was waiting at the edge of the woods. My daughter was so happy she was practically giddy. Later that day at lunchtime, we were sitting around the table with my parents and brother. My daughter told my brother, "Mom let the baby raccoons go." My brother became so angry he stood up at the table and started yelling at me about how he took the time to set the trap and how they were just going to get into my birdseed again. He was yelling so much his face was red. I think deep down my brother actually wants to use his guns on something, but he's not a hunter. He has probably a dozen guns, and I think, like some middle-aged men who never joined the military, he has some lone survivor, American sniper, patriotic fantasy when he uses his guns. He has his own shooting range, and that he built behind my parents' house. He was so nasty and angry that I stood up from the table telling him he was not going to treat me that way. My mother yelled at me to sit down and finish my lunch, and I refused. See, when you're the scapegoat, the normal is that your feelings, your desires don't matter. It didn't matter that I was the one graduating and maybe I wanted to go out to eat after the reception. It didn't matter to my mother that my brother was standing up at the table screaming at me over some birdseed and a trap. In her eyes, I had started the fight, even though I was the one being attacked. About a year ago, the pipes in my son's bathroom burst. They didn't freeze because it was the middle of summer. This is just an old house, and they were rusted. I'm always fixing something on this house. We didn't figure out anything was wrong until there was no water pressure. My son told my parents and brother that he'd heard a weird rushing sound like water running behind the walls. He's just a kid, so he didn't know what that was or what it meant. My mother and brother jumped all over him, saying, "The next time you hear something like water running, you need to tell someone immediately." It was like they were blaming him for the pipes bursting. My son is autistic and has trouble with social cues, but it was so blatant that even he noticed and said, "Why is it they blame us any time something breaks on this house?" It was just another opportunity for my brother to yell at my son and for them to show me that I'm the family scapegoat and that's the normal. Incidents like this have been going on since I moved here 8 years ago. One or two times I could have let go, but it's the fact that my parents allow him to act this way and don't defend me or my children. He's the son husband and the golden child, so he's given a lot of leeway. This is abuse in itself by seeing someone being abused and doing nothing about it. My brother's abuse of me and his general attitude towards me and the children has become my family's normal. It's normal for them to see my brother making demands or yelling at me or accusing my children of being disrespectful. My family's normal is that I'm the scapegoat. My mother has said on several occasions she doesn't know how she raised two children that can't get along. She sees my brother's abusive behavior as normal and just two siblings arguing. I think it goes deeper than that my brother is a very angry individual. He's carried anger towards me for years, and every time there's an argument, me, the scapegoat, is expected to be the bigger person. My son doesn't always catch social cues, but he said something very profound yesterday. He said, "Mom, why is it that the victim is always the one that's expected to be the bigger person and apologize?" It isn't always like that, but in a toxic family, the scapegoat, apologizing for everything, is the normal. I would love to hear other stories about toxic siblings and how you've handled navigating those relationships in your lives, especially if you're estranged from your toxic sibling. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and give a thumbs up. Don't tolerate toxic people and behaviors in your life. You deserve so much better. Take care.